The history of air power is the history of attack and defense. The struggle between the need to get to a target and the need to protect it. It's a battle the defense has been winning. Until now. Radar, radio detecting and ranging, changed everything. It was the key to the Royal Air Force winning the Battle of Britain in 1940. It came very close in 1943 to letting the Luftwaffe win the air war over Germany. The Cold War that followed was another story. The United States wanted intelligence about the Soviet Union, but there could be no massive suppression of Russian fighters. The result was the now famous U-2 spy plane, a design that was an outstanding success until one piloted by Francis Gary Powers was shot down in 1960. That win for the defense led to a redoubled effort to find an offensive solution. The same group which earlier had designed the F-104 Starfighter came up with a secret supersonic reconnaissance aircraft, the A-12, which subsequently evolved into this. The SR-71 Blackbird. This big black monster can maintain a cruising speed of 2,300 miles an hour and at a height of 95,000 feet. It holds all the current aircraft speed, altitude, and speed over distance records. For years, it was one of the tightest held secrets in the Western world. An immensely powerful, blindingly fast superplane. It was designed to be flown against the most sophisticated air defenses in the world. As proof of its capabilities, the SR-71 repeatedly overflew North Vietnamese and Chinese airspace without being successfully attacked between 1967 and 1972. The SR-71 Blackbird flies so high and so fast, it can theoretically only be brought down by the Soviet Union's monstrous Griffin SA-5 surface-to-air missile, traveling at Mach 5, and only then if it uses a nuclear warhead. As it gently bobs on subsonic air, take a close look at the world's fastest airplane. The reason it's so fast is the same reason a Formula One race car is fast. It has an incredibly high power-to-weight ratio. Weight has been kept down by building the SR-71 almost entirely out of titanium, one of the lightest metals on Earth. The strength comes from its two unique Pratt & Whitney engines, each rated at 35,000 pounds of thrust, enough to drive the world's largest ocean tankers. You can see one reason they're unique in the mouth of each engine. The two cone-like objects, or spikes, have a crucial role. Up to about 1,600 miles an hour, each engine acts as a normal turbojet. Then, as the speed increases, they become ramjets, with their afterburner providing practically all the thrust. To do this, the spike is automatically moved forward and back as the speed changes, so the shock wave just hits the leading edge of the inlet, maximizing the amount of ram pressure. The whole effect is so mean-looking, it's sometimes hard to really see the shape of the SR-71. Note that it's made up of a few long straight lines and a great many curves. See how the sides of the body are flared out into broad chines, and the same treatment is applied to the outer edges of the engine nacelles. Note that the wing is basically a large delta, and that the engines are partially shielded by those cones. Note, too, that the two vertical fins lean inward, and finally, note again that the whole outer skin is painted black. All of these elements came as the result of testing its predecessor, the A-12, on a special radar test site and making changes accordingly. The location of the engines, for example, was designed to make the aircraft as small as possible from the side and from the front, the direction of the potential acquisition radar. The chine and the angled wing and fins eliminated vertical surfaces so radar would be reflected at an oblique angle. And the aircraft was painted with radar-absorbent material, or RAM, to further weaken the return.
Terry approaching Mach 3. Roger that. Okay, John, we're stabilizing at Mach 3. I'm showing 81,400 altitude. And checks. And indicating Mach 3.0 at this time. Level off checks. Inlet set. Inlet's check good. Fuel check. Yeah, looks like we're about 3,000 low with the fuel. Roger that. Okay, this will be a problem. Plan no lower than 2,000 pounds. Let me take a look at the flight plan. I'll be right back with you. Okay. Yeah, we definitely have a problem here, Terry. If we don't improve our situation, we may be in a board. Okay, I'll start see what I can do from this end. Let's take another close look at it as we approach the sensitive area. You bet. About 1 minute out of the sensitive area at this time. Checklist is complete. And fuel trend is positive. Still showing us 2,500 pounds low, not enough to go. Roger that. I'm going to aft transfer to get our CG to a more efficient level. Roger, monitoring. Terry, about 30 seconds to the next turn point. Roger that. Stand by for the hack. Ready. Hack. 15 seconds to go. Got it. Fuel is very close. Checking out the decision point. That's at rollout. Checks. Stand by for the turn. Ready. Index. Turn. Back ankles look good. Attitudes cross check. Looks good. Gentlemen, adjust speed slightly to give you a smoother platform. Roger. Rolling out. At the decision point, rear cockpit, go. Front cockpit's good. Fuel holding at 2,000 low, that's been acceptable. Okay, that's right on the ragged edge. We cannot accept any fuel degradation. Roger. As long as the temps, outside air temperature holds, will be good. Yeah, I think it's gonna work. Stand by for sensor activation. Sensor's coming on now.
For flight, roll out heading 010.
Meanwhile, things were starting to go from bad to worse for jet fighters in the real world, closer to the mud. In Vietnam, losses were rising from SA-2 missiles and radar-guided guns. By 1972, Fewer than half the aircraft in a major strike against North Vietnam carried weapons. Most carried jammers. Then, in the 1973 Mideast War, Egyptian forces used the Soviet Union's gainful SA-6 missiles in action for the first time. These rocket ramjet combination SAMs used a different tracking radar than previous Russian missiles, and Israel's jamming equipment proved ineffective. The result was a near disaster for the Israeli Air Force. The writing was finally on the wall. Without a miracle, manned air power was at the end of the road. The answer to the radar challenge lay in a dusty, century-old set of equations formulated by Scottish physicist James Clerk Maxwell. Engineers tried working with the equations using the rounded shapes of then-current fighters. No matter what they did, they couldn't find a theoretical way to reduce a real radar cross-section because the computers simply couldn't handle all the possible numbers. Finally, Skunk Works designer Bill Schroeder had a brainwave. If the shape was too complex to compute, perhaps the shape could be simplified. Simplified a lot. His solution? A plane with no rounded surfaces. From any angle, the plane he drew up would present a finite number of edges or facets to the radar wave. In effect, they had stopped trying to design a plane with a low RCS. They were going to design a low RCS and then make it fly. The F-117A. For more than 10 years, this aircraft was America's best-kept secret. Designed as a demonstration project in 1976 and codenamed Hev Blue, it was so good, so invisible, the Carter administration immediately transferred the project to the U.S. Air Force Systems Command and placed it under special access rules. Testing went on through 1978. Before a test, even the gaps around the canopy and fuel filler door had to be filled with paint-type RAM and allowed to dry. One thing they found out was that every crack and slot mattered. Attention to detail even went so far as designing new screws because conventional slot-headed screws showed up like barn doors. Two more things. See the little bump on the engine compartment above the wing root? That's a radar reflector, so the F-117A can be seen in peacetime. And the same goes for the lights. If it comes to war, all that comes off, and you're left with a black hole in the sky filled with death. Hev Blue was virtually undetectable by radar. While most modern fighters have a radar cross-section the size of a house, the combination of shaping and RAM gave the F-117A an RCS about the size of a small bird. It is deceptive, isn't it? Just looking at the shape makes you think it's about the size of a sports plane. In fact, the 117A is an impressively large two-engined aircraft about the size of an F-18. Because its shape is so critical, its 4,000 pounds of smart weapons are carried internally, and even its pitot tubes, or airspeed sensors, have specially designed faceted faces. At the rear, engine exhaust is mixed with bypass air and blown through a slot several feet wide. The idea is to keep the heat signature down, and that's also the reason for the lip called the platypus that shields the exhaust from underneath. Handling? Well, remember, this was a plane designed almost exclusively for its radar cross-section. Pilots say it handles better than it looks, but they also have a name for it that probably reflects their true feelings. The nickname of the F-117A is the Wobbly Goblin. It doesn't look wobbly swooping through the evening sky over northern Nevada, does it? No. Mean and quick, maybe. Not wobbly. In ones and twos, the F-117A is meant to be an invisible killer. It's optimized to attack a small set of specific high-value targets such as command and control centers. This led to a full production order of 59 F-117s, the formation of a clandestine service, the 4450th Tactical Group, and the construction of a secret airbase at Tonopah, Nevada. By no coincidence, these squadrons were all night fighter units in World War II. That leaves one big stick right up in the air question. Why on earth is the pilot's compartment so high? You'd know just as soon as you got ready to land. The F-117A comes in nose high, real high, and unlike the Concorde, that nose isn't hinged to get out of the way. The only solution was to put the pilot up higher to make landing possible. So far, all but 3 F-117As lost in testing and training have landed safely. The F-117A, it's almost ghost-like. But there are even stranger craft being tested today at secret air bases throughout the United States. The 1960 barrage of Soviet SA-2 missiles that knocked down Gary Powers' U-2 had another effect. It put the U.S. strategic bomber force of B-52s down on the deck to avoid detection, and it put the various replacement programs for the B-52 into a kind of strategic and financial never-never land. One after another, the alternatives were measured, argued over, and compromised. First to go was the B-58 program, a relatively small Mach 2 bomber. An even more obvious casualty was the B-70 program. A 2,000-mile-an-hour bomber could hardly hide among the treetops. The result was the B-1 bomber. In its original form, the perfect compromise between speed and low-level attack. Looks like the B-1, doesn't it? No, this is the B-1B, the second version of the B-1, resurrected by the Reagan administration in 1981. And here, at last, we see some stealth characteristics. design ideas by then proven by the A-12 and the F-117A. But ironically, two of its basic ideas are now in conflict. The engine intakes almost certainly have made it subsonic, while the swing wings that let it fly low are best kept swept back to reduce its radar cross-section. Beautiful and mixed up, looking curiously like a dinosaur as it crosses the desert at cactus height. Instead of a compromise, what was needed was a bomber designed from scratch to penetrate the thickest possible radar defenses. A bomber incorporating the latest advances in stealth technology. What was needed was this unbelievable aircraft. The B-2 stealth bomber. There is no question this is a strange beast. At first glance, the B-2 seems almost organic, like some giant manta ray come to live on the desert. That's from the side. From above or below, it has no curved lines at all, just 12 straight edges, 5 parallel to the front left, 5 to the front right. In this respect, the bomber resembles the F-117A. But from the side or front, the B-2 is all gentle curves, not at all like the fighter. The reason is both complex and simple. The analysis that was impossible for Bill Schroeder in 1976 because it was too big for his computer was possible when the B-2 was designed because Northrop used a Cray supercomputer. The Cray allowed engineers to compare radar refractions on curved surfaces and juggle them with traditional aerodynamics. In this way, the B-2 is a lot more of an airplane than the F-117A. It doesn't fly in spite of its design. It flies because of it.
You're cleared to contact position. H4 is ready. Cleared to contact position. Forward 50. Forward 40. Forward 30. Forward 20. Forward 10. Forward 3. Contact. taking fuel, sir. Okay, you're taking 6,000 pounds a minute.
Imagine the B-2 coming toward an enemy radar. None of its surfaces will reflect directly back towards the transmitter. All the leading edges are covered in thick radar-absorbing material. The engines are buried inside the hull. Special efforts have been made to ensure that there are no 90-degree corners that could bounce the signal through two right angles and straight back down the attack cone.
And you have your outflow, 10,000 pounds. Disconnect now. Pilot boom, receiver's dropping back. And stabilize back in pre-contact.
The armaments are all inside, out of sight, but not out of mind. This is the plane the Soviet Union feared the most. At one swoop, it put the majority of Soviet radar defenses in the trash can. They had been designed for typical frontal aspect RCS figures of 10 square meters for fighters and as much as 1,000 square meters for a strategic bomber like the B-52. They were not designed for a bomber with an RCS of 0.01 square meters. There is an argument made by some experts that these two planes, the F-117A and the B-2, played a part in ending the Cold War. The Soviet Union's economy was already stretched to match America's military might when Russia discovered it had a new problem: fighters and bombers that could not be seen and thus could not be stopped. These experts say it was the straw that broke the camel's back. That Russia, in effect, said, Uncle Sam. If that's true, there's one man who deserves some credit at long last. His name is Jack Northrop, the creator of the N9M, the XB-35, and the YB-45, the Flying Wing. It's all in these planes: the thin cross-section, the absence of engine pods or tail fins or rudders, and, for the jet-powered YB-45, the low RCS figure. It was his company that kept the dream alive, that nurtured the Flying Wing for 40 years. It's almost uncanny. In fact, it's the most remarkable thing about the entire stealth story, that the B-2 and the YB-49 have exactly the same wingspan, 172 feet. As a mark of respect to this great American, the Air Force granted Jack Northrop a high-level security clearance just before his death in 1981, and told him about the B-2. You were right, Jack. While the United States developed its stealth fighter and bomber, it still faced the problem of how to protect its strike aircraft from intense ground fire and marauding enemy fighters. One solution was to build an aircraft that could fight its way to the target alone, bomb with pinpoint accuracy, then fight its way back home. The F-15E dual-role fighter was designed to do just that, and became Tactical Air Command's newest Night Stalker.
In the 14 years that have passed since first flight, the F-15 Eagle, built by Mac Air, has dominated the skies of the world as the Air Force's air superiority fighter. And in this role, the Eagle will continue to defend the United States and our allies for many years. This new breed of Eagle, the F-15E, will retain that capability, but it is also designed to strike high-value ground targets in night and in poor weather. Its new mission Long-range interdiction requires large payload capability as well as outstanding air superiority characteristics. Let's look at some of the changes that have been made to the Eagle, which is being displayed here. 60% of the airframe has been changed to make it stronger, giving the F-15E the ability to take off with a gross weight of up to 81,000 pounds and sustain a 9G load factor throughout its flight envelope. The same structural changes will extend its life expectancy to 16,000 hours of flight, or twice that of the earlier F-15s, and it will be able to carry up to 24,500 pounds of weapons. The low-drag conformal fuel tanks will add about 9,000 pounds of fuel. These tanks will carry weapons on stub pylons rather than on conventional carriage racks, reducing drag and thus stretching the range of the Eagle. That's just the airframe. The F-15E, as well as some recently delivered Cs and Ds, will be powered by two new Pratt & Whitney F-100-220 engines, which incorporate the latest in digital technology to provide better performance and better maintenance. Those of you who've seen the F-15 perform in air shows may find it hard to believe that it can accelerate faster or maneuver better, but that's what will happen with these new engines. For example, with a digital electronic control system, the F-15 pilot can accelerate from idle power to maximum afterburner in under 4 seconds, 40% faster than they could with the previous engine control system. Faster engine acceleration means quicker takeoffs and crisper response while maneuvering. The new engine is more maintainable as well. The digital system's components were designed with externally mounted modules that can be changed without removing the engine. This modular system has reduced the number of man-hours required to maintain the power plant by more than 50%. A system that automatically trims the engine will eliminate costly trim runs and result in a 6% savings in fuel costs. In addition, the 220 engine has an engine monitoring system that records engine data and faults, eliminating the need for manual tracking. It will substantially simplify engine troubleshooting and repair. And for the future, the F-15E has a new technology engine bay designed to accept other engines which may be desired to meet developing requirements. Mac Air has blazed a trail for the aerospace industry in developing a very sophisticated process called superplastic forming and diffusion bonding to help make this new engine bay. The process allows us to form larger parts from single pieces of metal, which reduces the number of fasteners and overall weight of the airplane at a lower manufacturing cost. To help guide the F-15E's crew over long distances in darkness and poor weather, several new avionics systems have been incorporated. The new inertial navigation system, developed by Honeywell, uses a highly reliable ring laser gyro to continuously determine the aircraft's position and provide that information through the computer to the various systems and displays in the cockpit, including a new moving map. This new system will feature reliability on the order of 10 times that of its forerunner. The Hughes APG-70 radar will find the target at long ranges. For example, from more than 80 miles away, at low altitude, the crew will be able to pick out bridges and airfields on the radar display. Nearing the target, the resolution becomes greater, and smaller targets, such as vehicles, are easily detected. The high-resolution radar is designed to create and freeze the maps during quick sweeps of the target area so that it may be shut down for much of the penetration portion of the mission, thus minimizing the opportunities for detection from enemy defensive systems. The E-model pilot will fly the aircraft with a new digital flight control system created by Lear Sigler. This system will feature an automatic terrain following mode, which will use information from the Lantern radar, and at the pilot's option, control the Eagle without pilot input at low altitude and at high speeds. For increased safety, the system will be triply redundant. The addition of these improvements will enable the F-15E to deliver weapons at night and in poor weather as accurately as today's best attack aircraft can in the daylight. These new systems will be manageable thanks to a complete update of the F-15E pilot's cockpit, but the most important addition to the F-15E is the new rear cockpit designed specifically for a weapons system operator. On 4 cathode ray tubes, the operator can display information from the radar, electronic warfare, or infrared sensors, monitor aircraft or weapon status and possible threats, select targets, and use an electronic moving map to navigate. Two hand controllers are used to select the new displays and to refine the targeting information. Displays can be moved from one screen to another and are chosen from a menu of display options. In addition to the three similar tubes in the front seat, the pilot has a transparent glass screen called a heads-up display, or HUD, in front of him at eye level that displays vital flight and tactical information. As in all earlier F-15s, the pilot can select his weapon options and displays with switches mounted on the stick and throttle and without having to look into the cockpit. Already the safest fighter in the United States Air Force history, the new version of the Eagle will provide a long-range ground attack capability without sacrificing its ability to survive, since it will retain all its air-to-air weaponry as well as its speed and maneuverability. Protection from ground-based threats is enhanced by the triply redundant digital flight control system, self-sealing fuel feed tanks and fuel lines, fire-retardant foam in the fuel tanks and voids, and a strengthened structure. Electronic protection is provided by an integrated internal tactical electronic warfare system. This system includes a radar warning receiver and active electronic systems designed to deceive enemy sensors. To confuse enemy infrared missiles, flares can be released and chaff can be expended to deceive enemy radars and disrupt radar-guided missiles.
Major changes have been made in the F-16C cockpit. These are designed to improve operational capability and flexibility. Directly in front of me is a new wide-angle heads-up display. It provides the pilot with all the flight information and weapons aiming cues he needs to keep his head out of the cockpit and on his target. The new HUD also has a raster capability for displaying a 25-degree field of view of infrared image. With an appropriate sensor, the pilot can navigate and deliver weapons by using the infrared imagery displayed on the HUD. Directly below the HUD is the integrated control panel. It's placed for easy upfront access to the navigation computer, radios, and the forward-looking infrared system. On both sides of this are two independent multifunction displays. They provide weapon and sensor control and large format displays of air-to-air and air-to-surface radar information, various sensor imagery, weapons and stores management data, as well as built-in test data. Prior to flight, all of the mission navigation, communication, and identification data plus target and weapon information are loaded onto this cassette. The pilot then inserts the cassette into the console receptacle, and all of the mission information is automatically loaded into the onboard systems. Of course, the pilot can modify that information at any time by using the upfront control panel. As in the F-16A, key controls are arranged so that the pilot, while in combat, can operate with his hands on the stick and throttle. For example, if while navigating or attacking a ground target, the pilot sees an airborne threat, he can switch to an air combat mode, automatically obtain a radar lock, destroy that enemy aircraft with an air-to-air missile or the gun, and then return to the original mode, all without moving his hands from the stick or throttle. Well, now let's get in the air. It's time to see these systems in operation.
Just like the F-16A, the F-16C is easy to start. No external support equipment is required. We only use one switch to turn on the battery and another switch to start the jet fuel starter. "30 seconds later, the engine is up to idle speed and the pilot begins his pre-flight checks and aligning the inertial navigation set. The entire process, from start to takeoff, can take less than 1 minute, but today we'll take it a little bit easier. With the data transfer equipment, the entire mission can be loaded into the aircraft systems in only 5 seconds. Carswell Tower, Dynamo 5 for takeoff.
Dynamo 5, Carswell Tower, wind 170 at 10, cleared for takeoff.
Dynamo 5, roger. The excellent field of view from the F-16 cockpit is one of the first things a new pilot notices. With no canopy bow frame and a low canopy rail, he has an unobstructed view of the world outside.
Contact of 175, 72 miles. Looks like a flight of 2, Angels 10. Close out concurs, showing 78 miles. James, close out shows 25 miles separation. Turn it down.
How do modern strike aircraft penetrate deep behind enemy lines, elude enemy radar and air defenses? The answer is as old as the American Revolution. If you don't want to get shot, get behind a tree. This means flying behind the hills, and that means getting low, real low, down in the weeds, at the speed of heat. These pictures show what it looks like at 550 miles an hour at 300 feet. What they can show you is the way it feels, banging against the harness, your stomach in your mouth, with death a second's misstep away. In combat, of course, it wouldn't be this simple. It would be at night. Lantaran, developed by Martin Marietta Corporation, stands for Low Altitude Navigation and Targeting Infrared Systems for Night. It combines forward-looking infrared imaging, terrain-following radar, precision pointing and tracking, laser designation and ranging, and automatic weapons handoffs to minimize pilot workload. Pilots of the 4th Tactical Fighter Wing say they can drop their bombs within 10 meters, some say 10 feet of a target. This accuracy can be achieved using the radar and infrared navigation pod and by overflying the target. As the pilot goes into an attack, he maintains his overall situation awareness in the HUD. He finds the target area and positions himself with the infrared or FLIR sensor of the navigation pod. The final approach is then set up with the targeting pod. After target lock-on, the attack is flown heads up with all weapons delivery calculations and functions performed automatically. But for all its capabilities, it's really only a stopgap measure. From the moment the RCS number became significant, both the Navy and the Air Force knew they had to have a better solution. The F-117A played a part in finding that solution by showing stealth technology could hide an aircraft from hostile radar. But the F-117A has none of the high-speed cruise capability of the B-2, none of the complex computer-drawn curves that both vector away incoming radar and cut a clean aerodynamic profile. What was wanted, what was specified, and what has been designed in complete secrecy until now is the next generation of American fighters. The Advanced Tactical Fighter, the ATF. This is the Northrop YF-23A, one of 2 prototypes competing to be the ATF master model, to have the right to take over the leadership of the F-14 Tomcat and F-15 Eagle. The other is the Lockheed Boeing General Dynamics YF-22A. These fighters have been set an almost impossible goal. They must first incorporate the hard-learned lessons of stealth technology to be difficult or impossible for radar to identify. Second, they must be highly maneuverable to out-hustle an opponent like today's high-performance interceptors. Thirdly, they've got to be fast. The requirement is for supersonic cruise speed with military thrust. That means afterburners are out. Their engines simply have to be that much more powerful. Fourthly, The ATF must have an adequate payload, something similar to the F-15's usual armament of 4 Sparrow missiles, 4 Sidewinder missiles, and 940 rounds of 20mm ammunition. And finally, as if invisibility, maneuverability, speed, and strength aren't enough, the ATF will have to have sufficient range for all world theaters. The YF-23A has those qualities because, like a good racehorse gets its genes from its parents, a good jet fighter has to look to its own forebearers. In this case, because it comes from Northrop, the YF-23A need look no further than the B-2, also built by Northrop. What role will this fighter play in world affairs beyond the year 2000? What missions, under what authority, will it undertake through what enemy skies? The future is not yet an open book. But when that book is written, when the paramount importance of commanding the high ground has been driven home, yet once again, this stark aircraft will have been one of the major players. The ATFs.
Awesome. He's gone.
The Lockheed YF-22 prototype flying here, and many of the other aircraft you've seen in this presentation, owe their design and capabilities to one man, Kelly Johnson, a legendary aircraft designer who founded and for more than 30 years led Lockheed's advanced development projects, known as the Skunk Works. The Skunk Works was a small but dedicated team of selected specialists who, under Kelly's leadership, worked on the cutting edge of technology and beyond. Of some 40 aircraft which Kelly brought to life in the Skunk Works, the SR-71 Blackbird was probably his greatest achievement. This presentation is dedicated to his memory.
Dear Kelly, you and I have never met. I'm not a former SR-71 pilot or RSO. I wasn't a member of your design team at the Lockheed Skunk Works or on the assembly line that built the Blackbird. Nor was I a member of the Air Force at Beale, Mildenhall, or Kadena, who kept the Blackbirds flying. I'm not even an airplane buff in the classic sense. I'm just a person that had the privilege of being around your SR-71 Blackbird, and it was an experience I will remember intensely for the rest of my life. There's just something about your Blackbird, Kelly, that words don't adequately describe. Anyone who has been near a Blackbird and felt its presence knows what I'm talking about. It's a feeling in your gut, and instantly you want to be part of it. Part of what I call the Blackbird family. Today, Kelly, you are being honored for your design work on the SR-71, and justly so. To me, the SR-71 is not only your greatest aircraft design, it is perhaps the greatest aircraft ever built. I've heard it said that you considered the Blackbird the most fascinating challenge of your career. No wonder. It was a design that was so advanced that everything that touched it had to be new. New manufacturing processes, new tools, new materials, a whole new approach. You built an operational stealth aircraft a decade before most of the world had even heard the term. It was a design so far ahead of its time that it retired before time could catch up with it. In times of crisis, the Blackbird provided 6 presidents with a unique and critical view of the world. The Blackbird served this country for just over a quarter of a century. In that entire time, it stood in a class of one. To me, the Blackbird is much more than a technical marvel. It's an airplane that gets inside you, an aircraft that causes the adrenaline to flow just by looking at it. Kelly, your Blackbird is the stuff dreams are made of. It's the model plane sitting in a young child's room, proof that everything is possible, that the sky isn't the limit. And it's the poster hanging on the office wall of a middle-aged engineer, testimony that yes, even in the real world, miracles do occur. The SR-71 embodies all that excites people about aerospace. Its crew seems part pilot, part astronaut. The Blackbird itself appears part airplane, part spacecraft. The typical Blackbird fan is a cross-section of America. It's your grandfather, your niece, your son. It's the wide-eyed young kid that buys an aircraft book at the National Air and Space Museum. It's the family that traveled hundreds of miles to an air show just to see a Blackbird in person. It's the people on the Air Force base that stopped what they were doing to watch an SR take off. Everyone, every time, no matter how many times they'd seen it before. And it's the pilot who last flew the Blackbird 20 years ago, who has the look in his eye that says, "I flew the best aircraft ever made." The look that can barely contain the desire to get in an SR just one more time and light the burners. When Blackbird 972 made its final record-setting flight to Dulles Airport, I watched the television with mixed emotions. This was the Blackbird's final flight. An aircraft that was the very definition of speed and power would fly no more. But my sadness was tempered by the knowledge that this plane would now truly belong to the nation, coming to rest in the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum. Now millions would be able to do what I had done. Be near a Blackbird, be part of the family.
To the men and women of the Allied forces who served during Operation Desert Storm, we proudly present the United States Navy's Blue Angels and the United States Air Force's Thunderbirds in a salute to the freedom that too many of us take for granted.